Hey, this is Gary Collins, creator of the Primal Power Method, and I'm here again with Sean Perkins with Principal Shield Financial. I'll get that right one time. And today we're going to talk about 5 ways you lose money, and that is, let's use a little different term. It was capital purchases. Let's just call it big purchases. How's that sound? Does that sound a little better?
Yeah.
And just explain to people what you mean by how they lose money by making big purchase items. But like a perfect example is paying cash for a car.
Well, yeah, so you said big purchases would be a house, a car, anything of that type of, it could be a yacht for all, for you, it'd probably be a yacht.
Oh, of course. Everyone knows I hang out with that kind of community.
But using a car as an example, well, let me start first with a phrase I use that kind of puts this in perspective, that when people pay cash, what they don't understand is that everything you buy is 100% financed. Everything you buy is 100% financed. That's confusing to some people. So let's talk about a couple of reasons why people pay cash. What do you think is the number one reason why people pay cash?
For me, it's because I don't like to finance things. I don't want the payment.
Okay, so you don't want the payment. What's
Yep.
another reason why people they don't want to finance stuff? They don't want to pay the interest to the lender, the bank, the credit union, whoever. They don't want to pay the interest. But I just said at the beginning is everything you buy is 100% financed, and here's an example of that. If you buy a car for $30,000 and you go to the bank or you go to the car place to buy it and you finance it with their financing, you're getting a loan from the institution, you're paying it back. If you have $30,000 in your savings account and you pull money out of your account and pay for the car cash, you financed it because wherever you had that money was earning some rate of return, and now you're not earning that rate of return. So you are saving interest that you would otherwise pay to the lender, but you're losing interest that you would earn on your money had you left it in the account. Well, a couple of things are happening with that. First and foremost, let me give you an example of how those numbers would look. Let's say you could borrow $30,000 from the car company at 5% interest. You're going to have a payment of about $566 a month for the entire 5 years that you borrow that money, and that means that you'll pay back $33,968. $30,000 of which was the money you borrowed. $39,668 is the interest that you would have paid over that 5 years.
Okay.
If you had $30,000 in the bank and you were earning 5%, over that same 5-year period, that $30,000 would grow to $38,501. The interest portion is the $8,501. That's what you would have earned. Well, in order to avoid paying $39.68 to the car company, you gave up the ability to earn $8,500 in interest having left the money in the bank.
Okay.
That's a loss of $4,533. Well, that's a loss of $4,533 if you were able to borrow at 5% and earn 5%. But we both know that car loans today are largely available at 0% interest, 1.9%, 2.9%. So if you could get it at 0, then you would obviously earn the entire 5%. If you get it at 1.9, 2.9, then you earn the difference between those two interest rates, all the while keeping your money in a liquid, safe environment where you have access to it should you need it. Because this brings me to another point that I want to make is if you take that $30,000 out of your account, pay cash for the car, you now don't have the $30,000. Now, let's just say that left you financially strapped while you were doing that, and then you suddenly needed access to money. How do you get money going forward? Most people have to borrow that money. So in your effort to not pay interest by borrowing it from the car company, you now might have to borrow it from another source, a credit union, a bank, a credit card. Now you're going to have to qualify to borrow that money in many cases. If it's an auto loan or if it's a mortgage, you're going to have to qualify. Now you have to get past what I call the 4 C's of borrowing. You're going to have 2 approvals. You have to be qualified, and then the asset you're borrowing against has to be qualified. If you're using your house, that house has to qualify for the financing as well. You're going to be subject to whatever the interest rates are at that given time. And if rates are higher then than they are today, that could be detrimental to you. And then the last thing is you're going to be subject to whatever the closing costs are to get that money from whatever financing source. So you lose liquidity, and now you have to qualify to get the money back. Those can definitely get in the way and cost you money. We want to look at talk about a concept of simple interest versus compound interest. And the car loan, I gave you the simple interest. was the 39.68. The reason that interest is less than the 85.01 on the other example in the bank is because simple interest is interest being charged against the declining balance. Every payment that you make on the car, the balance is going down, so the interest is calculated against a lower balance. In a compound interest scenario, that $30,000, the interest you earn each year is being added to that account, allowing it to compound. We call that reinvestment of principal of interest, and you're allowing it to compound, which is why it grows to so much of a bigger number. When you interrupt compounding, you're resetting that compound interest curve. You're losing interest. It's another way you lose money by how you pay for your major capital purchases. Something else to consider with certain types of financings, more specifically mortgages, they come with tax benefits. So when you borrow that money, when you pay the interest, the IRS allows you to write off the interest on your taxes. Mm-hmm. That means that in a situation where maybe you pay $20,000 in interest to the lender for the year, if the IRS lets you write that $20,000 off on your taxes, and that means you get a refund of $5,000, how much did you really pay in interest?
Yeah, you paid 15,000. Yeah,
you paid 15,000. So if you look at it in those terms, you really only paid 15,000 instead of 20. And if you don't borrow the money, you give up that deduction.
And you still have access to the money. I think that's the key part. Is, especially on a house. And I've done this for years. I pay cash for my cars. I've been doing that for at least the last 10 years. And I'm torn on it, to be honest with you. There's times when I've needed the money, and it's in my car.
Right.
And but I hate car payments. It's the psychological thing more than anything. It's just I hate car payments. I don't like them.
Well, and that's why we've talked about this in the first episode. I think we touched on it in the second episode. Is a key thing to understand here is when we talk about the things you and I are talking about in this series, we are not talking about rights versus wrongs.
Yeah.
Somebody who pays cash for a car or a house is not wrong versus somebody who doesn't is right. It is simply about efficiency and inefficiency. If you pay cash for a house, are you wrong? No, you've got no payments and you own the house free and clear and all those things that come with it. That's not wrong.
Yeah.
It's just that you may have been able to have or keep more of your money had you financed it, left that money in an account earning in a compound environment, taken the tax deductions and so on. You might have access to a little bit more wealth than you would otherwise have, but it doesn't make you wrong. We're not here to tell people that what they're doing is wrong. We're here to share with them that there may be other ways that are more financially beneficial. And that's all we care about is making sure they keep more of the money they earn.
Yeah, it's about leverage. I mean, that's the bottom line. You hear that, especially me as an entrepreneur and you as well. It's leveraging your money, which is the best way to go during a certain set of circumstances. I actually did finance my most recent big purchase, which was a new travel trailer. And the reason I financed it is because I needed that money for other things. Usually I would have paid cash for it, but I realized no, I need that money free in order to build my house that I'm doing right now, because I have to pay cash for that. That one I don't have a choice. And that's an interesting way to look at it too, is because I'm building off the grid, and it's part of my off the grid project that people can see on YouTube. I want them to understand this too, because I get a lot of questions on this. They go, how are you doing that? How you finance? I go, there's no financing. If you're off the grid, you're not connected. Off the grid means you're not connected to a public utility. So you're not hooked up to the power telephone cable, basically. You can get away with it with the sewage. There's iffy, weird rules there. Wells, it depends county, state. It's very complicated. You got to figure that one out on your own. But you have to pay cash. You cannot get a construction loan for an off-the-grid house. And you cannot get a conventional loan for an off-the-grid house. So I had to use that money that I'd usually pay for the trailer and then use that to build the house. But I also made a choice because of the car I had. I had to buy a new truck last year too because I needed a bigger truck. My other truck wasn't powerful enough for what I was doing, towing and everything. So I went and traded my other truck in and then paid the balance in cash. Well, I kind of looked back and I went, oh, God, should I have done that? Because now I do need it. Would have helped to have that money again to put towards the house. Because now I have to do it in stages because I don't have that free access. So I'm not going to build the house in one fell swoop. It's going to be pieces. I got to piece it together as I have the money. So that's
Right.
changed my financial outlook too, far as how I'm looking at where I'm pushing my money, where it's going, is it's all balanced upon how I'm going to build this house and time wise. And
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
right. So it made me look at my big purchases totally differently in order to leverage my money.
And we tend to look at decisions regarding our finances in a very narrow window of time. We compartmentalize our lives, if you will, but we look at the most recent 24 months surrounding any decision that we make. We tend to think that the circumstances that exist today, that's the way it's going to be forever. Um, I don't, sometimes I use examples and they kind of they strike a chord with people, but we assume that because we're married today, we're always going to be married. We look at the fact that because we're employed today, we may always be employed. My wife recently went through a year layoff. It took her a year after getting laid off from being in a job for 15 years to find another job. That year that she was laid off was not a good year for us. It wasn't a good year for her because of the mental tricks that being unemployed and you can't find another job plays on you. But had we made decisions about paying cash for everything and then she was without a job, we might have shorted ourselves on liquidity, on money, having access to liquid cash in an emergency situation. So that's a big thing, is keeping access to your cash, and you already made that point. One other thing I'll point out there, and this is going to affect more long-term financing than short, but inflation can play a major role in our borrowing decisions. What I mean by that is when you get a mortgage for the first time, and my 24-year-old son's looking at buying a condo right now, and so I'll use him as an example. For that condo payment, he's looking at about $2,100 a month. For him, at 24 years old, only in his second job out of college, that $2,100 represents a significant amount of money to him on a monthly basis. It's a big part of his budget. If he keeps that condo, though, for say 5 or even 10 years, that $2,100 is going to become a smaller and smaller and smaller portion of his budget, and the house payment will become more and more affordable for him. So even though he's still paying interest on the loan, he still has the monthly payment. It doesn't feel like it's costing him as much money because he's now making more money. So his income goes up with inflation, but his mortgage payment stays the same. If you have longer term financing, now they're coming out with 7 to 10 year financing, depending on the vehicle that you buy. The longer that you have that vehicle financed, the less impact that monthly payment's going to have on your budget.
Yeah.
Your most valuable dollars are the dollars that you have today because they're the least affected by inflation, and you can put those to work for you in today's current interest rate environment and even the future interest rate environment. So the example would be if you think interest rates are going to rise. I'm asking you that question.
Oh,
Do you think
oh
interest
yeah,
rates are
they're
going to
definitely
rise?
going to go up. They have to.
So if you can lock in long-term financing today at say 4.5%, or even zero on a car loan, but 4.5% on a long-term mortgage, and you can invest that money a year, 2 years, 3 years from now at 5, 6, 7, 8, 10%, because interest rates have risen. You're only paying 4% for the money that you borrow from the bank, but you're earning 6, 8, 10% where it's invested.
Yeah.
So you get those different benefits by considering what options are available to you and not just simply making decisions in a vacuum, which is I don't want any payments and I don't want to pay any interest. Because let me ask you this: if you pay $30,000 cash for the car, do you have a payment?
Well, yeah, technically you do because I took that money out of anything that I could have financed into. The problem with most people today, though, is they're not using that chunk of money and making interest on it in a smart way either. So they're actually losing on both ends. If they don't finance,
Right.
it's that balance. You got to figure out, okay, I have this money. I need to put it somewhere where it's going to make money for me. And that's
Right.
another tough one, through different financial vehicles and investment vehicles. Sometimes those tie your money up. You can't get the money out for a
Right.
period of time. Money market accounts are pretty much non-existent now. Back in the day, you could get 4 or 5%. They're around, but the interest rate is so low
Yeah.
that,
0.1%. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it makes it
But you
tough.
keyed in on something. You keyed in on something in the beginning of that particular part, which was what you don't have is a structured payment. You don't have a lender that tells you send me 566.14 a month on the car loan if you pay cash. What you do have now, though, is an unstructured payment, which is you need to put the money back into your account to get ready for the next car you want to pay cash
Yeah,
for.
yeah, that's very true.
What's the problem? It's a benefit, but what's the problem of an unstructured payment? If
Yeah,
we don't have somebody telling us how much we have to
yeah,
send and how often we have to send it, we largely won't do it.
yep.
And so it takes a lot of discipline to do that. Well, for those that have that discipline, kudos to you, and maybe that plan works good for you. But for those that don't, and I include myself in that, discipline is something that you have to work on every day. You may find yourself not, having as much money as you'd otherwise have had you had somebody telling you have to put this much away every month. No questions, no argument. So there's several things to consider, and I think that it's not a right or wrong. It's just simply what's beneficial to you, what other types of financing are available, and does it make sense for you to pay cash versus finance?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all it's a variable depending on who you are, time, circumstances, where you are in your life, what you're trying to accomplish financially. So yeah. With that being said, for people who want to get your services and get your great experience in these matters, where can they get a hold of you?
Well, my website is www.principalshield.com, principal being spelled Principal. My email address is Shawn, SHAWN, at principalshield.com. My cell phone number is 619 area code 994-1110. And my blog address is another way to see these kinds of things that we're talking about in a written word, so you can benefit from them on a weekly basis as I post blogs, is www.wiseandwealthyblog.com.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Shawn. And people can get a hold of me at contact@primalpowermethod.com. And hopefully we get some good questions. And we'll have some future. This is part 5 of our final series, but there will be more financial episodes on various topics in the future. So thanks again.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate the help.